Hello everybody. I've just received a shipment of these lovely cradled plywood panels. Nice beautiful plywood on the front, and they're set on a cradle. And I like to paint on these for various reasons. And one is that they hang really nicely on the wall without a frame and just on a nail. So they make it really easy for people to buy and hang your art. And secondly, they provide a really nice surface for painting on, and you can build up lots of nice layers, and you can actually kind of almost carve back into your layers when they're on these lovely firm plywood panels. But they have to be prepared before you can start painting, and that involves first of all sealing the boards and then doing a coat of gesso or a couple of coats of gesso before you can even start painting. So today I'm going to spend in my studio just doing a bulk preparation of panels. So the first thing I do is do the sealing. And what I'm using to seal is this mixture of just PVA glue from the hardware store and water. So it's about 2/3 PVA and 1/3 water. You can buy products. You can buy, I think one is called GAC 100 from Golden. But this is a really economical way for sealing your boards. And it's used by painters and decorators to prime and seal walls and also things, timber like skirting boards, before they start to paint. And I've found it works really, really well for these panels, so that's what I use. And this is just a decorator's brush from the hardware store as well. So I start by doing into the edges and then all over the back. So first one way and then the next. And then make sure that I've done these side edges along here. And then I do the backs of the cradle. And just go back over and pick up any excess and just smooth it out. Then I do the sides. When you are putting anything wet onto a board like this, it will raise the grain and make the surface feel quite rough. So after I've done a coat of gesso, I will give this a sand to make it feel smoother. It doesn't really matter on this surface because I'm going to be using quite thick paint. But it just feels nicer when people pick this up if the sides aren't all rough. So I will definitely sand those. So I'll leave that one because I've done the back and the sides, and I'll be able to leave it on its front to dry. And I'll just continue to do the backs of all my boards, and when they're dry I'll then do the fronts of all my boards. So that's the back sides have dried enough for me to continue, and this time sealing all the fronts. Just finishing off the same direction as the grain of the wood. And making sure the edges are cleaned up. So now the front and backs have been sealed with the PVA. It's time to apply the gesso. Now before you do, you need to really decide what you want your sides to look like, because some people like to have the wood showing. And if that's you, if you're a person that wants to show the sides of your frame, and you'd like to have the wood showing, then it's a good idea at this stage to use some masking tape and cover up the wood before you do any gessoing. I'm not going to do that because I like to paint my edges. So if you have a piece of work and you are not going to frame it, you can paint the edges. And my edges have not been painted all that well, but that's because I put them in a cradled frame. And so when you're in the frame, you can't really see the edges, but you can kind of just get the idea of that something has been painted, so you don't need to be all that careful. But because I paint my edges, I would also gesso the edges before I paint them. And some people also like to paint the back, and if you are not framing yours, you might like to gesso even the frame around here and leave the wooden bit plain, or you might like to gesso the whole lot and finish it by painting the whole thing white or whatever colour you want when you're finished. But because most of this is not seen when I frame this, I'm not concerned about what anything really looks like. I could just take that bit of paint off later on and clean up the back. So for me, I'm going to gesso the front and the sides. And I'm using System 3 acrylic gesso primer. And I'm using a brush that's narrow enough for me to dip quite cleanly into my pot. And then it's just a matter of doing a fairly generous coat. Again, you can start by doing your coat one way and then finishing off the other in the direction of the grain of the wood. So that's the front done. And to do the sides, I can put this on a tin, and I find that helps with the sides, and then I can just come in and paint it like this. But for this demonstration, I'll just lean it up. So then it's just a matter of painting the sides. And be fairly generous and give a good rub in where the panel joins the sides. If you're not a very careful painter, you could always put tape on this edge as well if you wanted to keep it clean. But as I said, that's hidden in my frame, so I'm not terribly bothered by that. If I was going to be selling these unframed, I would take a little bit more care. So I'll do one coat on all of my pieces, and then I will sand in between the first coat and the second coat that I'll come back and do. So that is the first coat all done, and now I just get a sanding block, and this is quite a fine sanding block, and I find this works better than sandpaper, and just give a light rub over just to get rid of any rough bits. It's much better to do this outside to keep your surface nice and clean, but it's very cold and miserable here in Scotland today, so I'm just going to do it inside. It doesn't take a lot of sanding to remove those rough edges at all. And then now I'll do the next coat after I've wiped it down. I'm just using a paper towel. And I'll clean my surface as well.